Being happy, engaged, and productive is not only about doing what you love, but also being the person who you love in yourself. Welcome to the 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. Here you learn about leading authentically. You'll hear stories from leaders about leading authentically at home, work, and community, and how that led them to a fulfilling and prosperous life. Welcome to 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. Today we have an interesting topic with Marc Padberg, the founder of Deep Dialogues. Marc, how are you?
Hey Zahi, yeah, it's good to be with you and good to see you again.
Wonderful. Before we get started with our great topic today, it's an interesting topic. It's about authentic leadership in times of crisis. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Deep Dialogues and what do you do there?
Yeah, Deep Dialogue is a company I founded a few years ago that has as its objective to restore connections in fragmented and polarized contexts. I do that both in the corporate sphere, but also in the societal sphere in some post-conflict contexts like the Balkans, Lebanon. We're working at the moment on a project. And in the organizational context, it is companies who have gained the awareness that harm done in the past has led to traumatizing events and to have a dialogue around it in order to integrate these experiences into culture and into their way of collaborating and working together.
So, our topic today is about authentic leadership. We've known each other for quite a few years and we've reconnected a few months ago. We had a little discussion about what's happening in the Middle East, in Gaza, and it kind of reignited that topic of authenticity about what happens to leadership in times of crisis. What I've seen is a lot of leaders shy away from being authentic when things get tough. So, my question to you is how can we remain authentic when things are not going the way we like to?
Yeah, and maybe it's helpful before I answer that question to share how I look at authenticity. Like, what is it? And what are we speaking about? And for me, authenticity it's beyond positions, it's beyond opinions. It is when something that is true about ourselves as leaders or as human beings in general is touched upon, is shared with others. So for me, in authenticity, there is an inherent vulnerability because we're revealing something about ourselves that is true about ourselves that often gets hidden behind the role we have, the position we have, or sort of the message that we think we should be emitting. And when we have the courage to step beyond it, and this is what I see a lot in my work with leaders, and when I spend time with leaders and their teams, the moments the leader has the courage to express from this vulnerable space their truth, that's when authenticity is present in the room and everybody feels it. As something changes in the energy, the guards of protection go down and there is it's an edge because authenticity is the moment when we risk by speaking our truth to be rejected in our truth by the others. And because it's something that is really true about ourselves, there is something really, yeah, also risky and scary about it. Because something that is important and true about us can actually be the moment we reveal it and get it out of the shadows can be rejected. And doing that is, yeah, for me, the essence of authenticity. And what it does when we do that and we take that risk, it immediately establishes connection. There's a relatedness that opens up because we share this truth. Now, if you do that in the context of conflicts, and there are many these days, you mentioned Gaza, there's others, there's other crises that we're in the midst of and increasingly are so as humanity, then doing so takes even more courage. Because around these conflicts, there is, yeah, an increased separation, polarization, division happening, where very easily being outspoken about something that is true for us is seen through the lens of are you with us or are you against us? Yeah, in my opinion, since authenticity, the way I see it, always comes from the heart or the soul, it's like an inner truth that radiates through, that sounds through. Being authentic always is a possibility and almost inherently means that we speak from a place that is in service of the whole rather than a part. And I think that's really where the opportunity for being authentic in the context of conflicts lies, is to do the inner work before we speak, to see where am I not serving the whole, where am I drawn to serve a part rather than the whole, knowing that if I do so, I will, the moment that I do that, alienate the other part. And then we become part of the polarization. And I believe that the leadership that is asked from us in these times is a leadership that is able to hold the both ends, to hold the polarities of the different positions and to serve the whole, because that's, I think, the only way forward to find sustainable solutions to the crises that we have. And becoming part of the part rather than the whole means we join the polarization and we join the re-traumatization that happens as a result of it, as we see it happening these days.
I like the way you use courage because in preparation for this, that's a word that kept coming to my mind about authentic leadership. Yes, it does need courage to speak your truth. It does need courage to stick to your values. Easier said than done. How can a leader be courageous? How can a leader know their values and stick to their values and also speak their truth in time of crisis, whether it's a political crisis, that's what's happening right now, and a lot of us feel that silence is not serving anybody, or if it's a big change that's happening or big crisis that's happening inside the organization. How can we encourage leaders to find that in them, to speak the truth, and the word that you also use, risk, risk their position, risk the way others look at them, and so forth.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Zai. For me, authenticity is always a function of consciousness and awareness. So that means that what we're not aware of, what we don't see as leaders, or what we don't find important, yeah, we will not pursue. So I believe I was just thinking about it as you were asking the question. To be an authentic leader, there is an importance that needs to be given to the value of integrity. If we don't somewhere find that important, because for me, authenticity is about integrity and is about the congruence that we have between what we say, what we think, and what we feel, and what's happening inside of us. If all those are aligned, then we become authentic. And then there's no mismatch between these things. And subtle as it may sound, people, in my experience, always feel it when these things are not aligned. Not always consciously, it can also that you receive that information subconsciously, but there is an information that is transferred. So once a leader is aware of the importance of integrity, that can only happen, that can only come when there is enough awareness of what's happening inside of them. And when they are aware of their inner reality, of their inner space. Like I said, integrity is the congruence between these different sort of emotional bodies and physical bodies and our mental body and the different sort of parts of us. And only when we have the awareness of what's happening there and receive that information and are conscious of it, we can be in integrity. And then the next thing is that we can be authentic. So for me, the important thing is for leaders, and this is the practice that for years I've been doing with the leaders that I was serving through my work. Also prior to the work that I'm doing with Deep Dialogues, I've been for more than 10 years, 15 years almost working in the field of leadership transformation, is that it starts really with the inner work. It starts with the consciousness. It starts with the awareness of what is important to us and what is true about us. And then we can be authentic. So the practices to become more aware as leaders of what that is, I think is a condition for that.
Thank you for that. And how can leaders in times of crisis Because what I'm seeing is when the heat is on, when there is a crisis around us, and you mentioned that service of the whole, not the service of the part. In times of crisis, there's an element of fear of speaking up, element of fear of going against the wave, against probably sometimes against a lot of people that are within our organization or within our community. When is it okay to stay silent? And when do you think it's okay to speak up? And when is it really critical to speak up?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say let's explore it together. I don't have a pre-cooked or predetermined answer to that, but I think there's an individual answer and there may be a collective dimension to the answer of that. When we feel that the inner tension is such with the reality as it is happening outside of us and the challenges that it brings to us as a human being, but potentially also as just in our professional role as a leader, that the tension becomes so big that we need to do something with it. And I've been working just recently with a CEO of a big tech company that was really struggling with the fact that their infrastructure was used for hate speech, misinformation, a lot of the things that are happening on social media, and was really struggling with, yeah, what we have a responsibility. I have a responsibility as a leader to do something about it. But what? That inner tension that he felt with, I mean, that's a tension in his values came up, brought up the question on the company level, like, and then he engaged his leadership team around it, like, how do we want to respond to this and what position do we want to take? And that's a very individual process. If there would have been another CEO, and there are more tech companies like his, where the CEOs don't speak up about this, because for some reason they think it's not important enough, or they think it's too scary or too risky, and they stay silent, just like you said. And this one chose to speak up because of his inner values were triggered so much that he felt that they as a company needed to do something about it. That's sort of on the individual level. And then on the collective level, I think these times that we are living in are more and more bringing to the surface the awareness that we collectively have a responsibility for where we as humanity are going, and that it becomes more and more difficult to pretend that we don't see these things and that we don't do something about it because we have other things to care about and to worry about. And I think we're living in a time of innocence lost in a way, where so much is happening that, yeah, denying is no is no longer a possibility in a way, because it's so all present that it brings up the question for us collectively, like, can we stay silent or do we need to speak about it? And I think this question will become more and more compelling, and more people will realize that staying silent means that in a way you're being complicit to what's happening. You're not doing something about it, and that innocence is an illusion.
Absolutely. For me, I mean, I'm from the region. I'm from for example, from the Middle East, and I'm seeing this crisis and unfolding. I'm Palestinian. I acknowledge there's a big bias towards what's happening in the region. And for me, it's really hard not to judge leaders who are not speaking up, who are quiet, especially those who are acting like there's nothing happening around us. I feel a struggle within me to try to understand why that is. I've got into this leadership development space for a reason, to make a difference, because I know leaders can make a difference, and I wanted to find a way to support that. And seeing more and more people being quiet, for me it is being silent is complicit. And again, I'm speaking from a place that identify with what's happening. It's really hard to control my thoughts, my emotions, when I see important influential leaders. I'm not talking about political leaders, I'm talking about our day-to-day leaders not doing enough or not saying anything. On the contrary, they're just living their life like nothing happened or nothing is happening. Am I wrong thinking that way? What is it?
I would never approach these questions as a right or wrong. What I see is that given your personal history and your ancestry being connected with the Palestinian past and story, yeah, there is, you called it a bias, there is a loyalty. You're affiliated, you're identified with this group, and therefore with its history and the traumatization and the things that have happened since. Being in that position from my position, you being in that position, I can only approach it and see it with respect, with acknowledgement of the difficulty that you must have to understand, like you said, why certain leaders stay silent, because there's a lot of pain that you're experiencing with what's happening in Gaza, that is directly related to your ancestral history. I can only imagine, and I cannot feel it because I don't have that same history, how difficult it must be to do so. What I can do is offer my understanding and my feeling with you on how challenging that must be without any judgment. And therefore, there's no wrong for me. There's just you are where you are, and I totally get it. And the privilege that I have of being on the third side, so to speak, not being identified with either the Jewish side or the Palestinian side, although the third side is not without its history, because we as Europeans, and I'm Dutch, we've been in the Holocaust actively or passively allowing the events to happen, the persecution and the killing of the Jews, which has led, in my opinion, also to the creation of the state of Israel. It was a way for us to make up for the guilt we felt of what happened to the Jews. So I'm not neutral in that sense. I'm also part of this conflict, and I think, but still, I'm less in a way directly in it, in the heat of it, of the conflict today in Gaza, than you or an Israeli or a Jewish person would be. And that gives me the space to, to look, to see if I can hold this inclusive perspective of seeing both the pain of the Palestinian people and the Jewish people, and also understanding the people who have a difficulty to speak about it, also when they are like me from the third side, when they are from the US or from Europe somewhere or anywhere. So I think the best always that we can do when there is trauma, when there is fear, when there is pain, is to acknowledge what is. The moment I have a judgment about it, I create another separation between me and the other. So what I can do is I can look with compassion at why these leaders stay silent. And if I speak to some of them, I can bring it up and I can share why I say what I say. And and then maybe get someone to think differently about it, or post something in social media so that people read it and maybe get also into to new thoughts. But for you, from your position, I think, because that's I think the question you asked. Yeah, it is. So, and maybe the key is in the word wrong that you used. The moment you would sort of label yourself as wrong, to think that, there is again a rejection of something in yourself. So I think it really starts with acknowledging, yes, I find it really difficult to understand why leaders don't speak up, period. Just give that space, like, this is what I'm really struggling with. And that is just as it is, without any further judgment, without wanting to change anything about it. And once you give space to it, and this is generally true for trauma, is that the best thing that we can do is to give space to it, to allow it to be in ourselves, and even better, in the presence of others. Like, we have a conversation now. When you speak about it, I'm with you and I hear your struggle with it. And I feel the tension that it brings in you. And when that permission is there to share it and to presence it in the presence of others, and it's not something you need to resist or you need to push away, then that can be the opening to something else. So only then, as long as we reject it, it just hinders us and it stops us from moving anywhere else.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. This episode is sponsored by 360 Degrees Consulting, Inc. For information about our training, coaching, or consultancy services, please email us at info@consulting360d.com. Thank you for that. Which brings me to ask, where do you think we should go from here as leaders? Because this, of course, that what's happening in Gaza, for example, is magnified. It's a pressing issues that we have to deal with. I've experienced that the same thing, by the way, in the corporate world, where leaders were supposed to speak and they're respectable with high integrity leaders, that they decide sometimes not to speak up or not to tell their truth. And sometimes they stay silent on what they stand for, what their values are. But how can we change that? And because honestly, sometimes I feel that we've worked so hard in developing leaders, help the leaders transform, but I feel it's not enough. So where do we go from here?
I said it in the previous answer that I gave. We cannot force anyone to do anything else than they already do. So if we would do so, we would judge, we would reject where they currently are, and we create separation again. So the only thing that we can do is with those leaders who are already enough to be open for a certain message, to have a dialogue around it and to explore their position around it. So, first of all, we need to have access to these leaders. Second of all, they need to be ready and willing to speak about these things. And then, third of all, while speaking with them, then, yeah, anything can happen. It can be that the fears are too big because the vested interests that they, for example, have with their business, they fear that they might be threatened if they would take a certain position or spread a certain message. Yeah, all of that needs to be accepted and presenced. And the only thing that can happen if all these three things are happening that I just described is that someone reaches the point that he feels that, or she feels that, having reflected on all of that and having felt what they came across as they explored their own inner fears around it, that doing something about it is being truthful to themselves. And that may even also be different for different people. So I think there's not one answer that would come out of this process, is more important than hiding behind the fear that they may have seen and the interest they have. And then in itself, the realization that these fears are present is an authentic moment of leadership. Like, I'm too afraid to take the risk to speak out on this particular topic because I might risk losing X number of clients and business, and it might lead to unemployment of some. I might need to fire people. That's an authentic answer. So authentic leadership can lead to different stories and different decisions. But the authenticity lies in I'm being truthful about the fact that I'm just too scared to speak up.
You work a lot with trauma healing. What can we do, especially those who are directly affected with a crisis? What can we do while we're in the crisis? Is there anything can be done? A lot of us think that trauma healing happens after the fact, but when a crisis is happening, is there anything that we can do?
Yeah, there's a lot we can do, really a lot. And I worked with an organization called the Center for Mind Body Medicine. I'm also certified in their approach. They've done a lot of work in Gaza. They trained, and they have a train the trainer approach where they train a circle of people and they become trainers, and then they train another group and then expands. And they have trained up to 300,000 people in Gaza to learn sort of basic skills on how to regulate yourself. So what trauma does is it overwhelms your nervous system and then you shut down. And then basically in that shutdown, there is a freeze that happens that isolates you and that stagnates any inner processes in a way. There's no feeling anymore. There's a numbness. There is, yeah, an inner pause that happens. The sooner you, by relaxing, self-regulating or regulating your nervous system, the sooner you access the trauma once it's been reached, or what has been created, I mean, the easier it is to unfreeze it. The longer we keep it, the more it sort of becomes rigid and stays there, and the more difficult it gets to soften it, open it, and to bring it into relation and to bring it into connection. So practices that can help. So yeah, really, it's important to not wait with it, but to bring it into relation first of all with yourself, and then ideally with the support of someone else, to start relaxing, regulating your nervous system again. The way to do that is several things that can be done. Breathing is a really good way to do that. So there is, for example, the 4-7-8 breath, where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you exhale for 8 seconds, 4-7-8. When we do that for like 1 or 2, 3 minutes, it immediately relaxes our nervous system. And this relaxation that happens then allows to let some of the overwhelm that's been repressed and held inside to open up and to relax a bit and to let some of that go. You can also do it by so-called soft belly breathing, which is you put your hand on your belly and you try as much as you can to see if you can belly to your breath. And while you do that, you just say the word soft. And when you exhale, belly. And when you inhale, soft and belly. And that's another way. So breathing is a way to do it. Grounding yourself and just feeling your feet, feeling your body as much as you can again. Moving and shaking to just like the animals do when they have traumatizing events, shake it off. That is a way to do it. The most, I already hinted at it a few times, the most powerful thing to do is to presence it with someone else, to let someone else be there with you and hold space, as we facilitators call it. Be present and create an allowing space in which the other feels held, that someone is with their full attention with them, supporting them, to then see if they can speak about what they feel, what's their inner experience. And then it's actually not important, and actually in a way not necessary, to speak about the events that have been seen, that have been witnessed or experienced, but just the inner reflection of it, because trauma is not the event. Trauma is our inner response to an overwhelming event. So when we stay with our inner response, like what's happening in my body? Where do I feel numb? Where do I feel contracted? Where do I feel tension? Or what emotions do I feel? Just presence that. That is the work. That's enough. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. Really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Marc. Any final words before we end this episode?
Any final words? Yeah, I think sort of the bigger question that these times are asking from us as human beings, and I think in these times, what they're calling us for is that everybody is a leader. We all are the leaders that we've been waiting for. And this is also how I more and more approach my work, also with top teams. Like you're not. It's not just you who are the leaders. Your job is to empower and to enable the collective wisdom that is present in your organization, from which way too little is used by limiting it with structures and processes and systems, to access that information much more. And what I've been working on with several of my clients is the way to do that is to use these crises that we now spoke about and all the tensions that are happening around them, also inside of organizations, to have dialogues with each other about what it evokes in us, on the tensions that are happening in us, to bring that all to the collective awareness. And when we do that, to get into processes of deep sensing and deep listening, like with the U process, is a wonderful way to do that. In a trauma-informed way, so that we also become aware on the presence of trauma and how that is also limiting us, to use the collective wisdom to find together ways through the crisis. I don't think there's going to be a back to normal in the time that we live in. So new solutions, new approaches, new ways of working, new ways of organizing need to be found. Yeah, I think that's really the gift of these times, that the crises are now so omnipresent and on so many different levels, and probably will not get less, that it's a really, I mean, as the Chinese word for crisis says, it's an opportunity and a threat. And Wei Ji, two characters, two different meanings, to use this period as an opportunity to use really the collective capacity and the collective wisdom of us as human beings to move through it.
Marc, thank you so much. For those in our audience who want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to, if they reach out and want to connect with me, I'm happy to accept any invites that are coming. And my email address is me, and then my last name.com. First and last name, so me at marcpadberg.com. So also happy to receive emails.
Thank you so much for your time and for this really informative and helpful session. I'm looking forward to our future conversations. Thank you for listening to our 360 Degrees Growth Podcast. If you like our podcast, please make sure to follow our channel. Also, please like and share our episodes on social media.